what we are seeing really is a technological arms race between the richest companies in the world, the most powerful governments in the history of the species, and then a lot of people in economically precarious, politically disenfranchised, and otherwise disadvantaged positions who are seeking to effect change on a local level. And on the one hand, you have governments that have, the NSA, which has 30,000 people who are just on its own internal classified network, who are able to go in every day, 9 to 5, and with all their different missions, watch the whole world to the best of what their technological capability happens to be that week, and every week it gets better. But that doesn't mean there's nothing we can do. That doesn't mean we can give up. I think what I always advise people to do is to try to understand technology that you're using, at least generally. It's not fair to ask community organizers and activists to be able to fight off the NSA, the Mossad. If you're in Russia, the FSB. If you're in China, the MSS. Every country of any serious geopolitical weight today has an internal security service. And we don't like to think about this in these terms in the United States. It's not polite to describe the FBI as an internal security service. We think about them, we're shown them on TV and in movies as the good guys, who are saving us from terrorists, criminals, mobsters, whatever. Again, the light holding back the darkness is very clear, black and white world of good guys and bad guys. But you have to remember that it's that same FBI that Alvaro M. Bedoya, professor, I believe, at Georgetown, declared Martin Luther King Jr. The greatest national security threat in the United States 2 days after he gave the I Have a Dream speech. You have to understand that in places, in agencies and governments where, again, they see themselves as the shield against change, because instability is the enemy, instability is the bad thing, progress looks like a threat. And so when you start to understand that you will always be the enemy to them, even if what you're doing is absolutely right, even if you are the most peaceful, even if you keep your nose clean, even if you are the perfect angel that they always deny that any activist is when they run up against law enforcement, because in reality, everyone's life is complicated and we all have to make hard choices. We need to understand how it is that we are targeted, at least generally. The technologies will change. The programs that you use for safe communication, which right now you could download, for example, the Tor browser, Tor. This allows you to browse more anonymously on the internet. You could use Signal, which is an encrypted messaging application. It's free, it's not corporate. These things are great for the moment, but they don't protect you. They're not an invisibility cloak it's not a get out of jail free card. What it does is it reduces your window of vulnerability. It reduces what can be easily and cheaply known about you. And you have to remember that even the NSA, even the FBI, whoever you're afraid of, they have a budget too. They have a limited number of people, even if it's an extraordinary number of people. There are so many hours they can work, there are so many things they can look at, and they want to go home and watch their shows too. The harder you make their work, the more free you make your society. And I say that, people get nervous about this. They think it sounds radical. They think it sounds like pro-terrorist or whatever. But you have to understand that in the United States, if you believe the lofty rhetoric that we put in founding documents, right, which we all know were not so perfect, but if we believe the things that we were taught is the way America is supposed to be, the work of law enforcement is supposed to be hard. It is supposed to be difficult. The extraordinary powers that they are granted are supposed to be used as a last resort when there's a real public safety imperative in play here. And their actions, whatever they may be, despite the gravity of the threat, are supposed to be limited to what is necessary and proportionate to the threat faced, the threat presented. Now, when is the last time, you went on Twitter and looked at the police videos of the day and went, oh yes, that's necessary and proportionate to the threat of protesters, people marching. And then we talk about just organizers, right? People who are trying to make a change. And this is at the planning stage. Well, this gets back to understanding a fundamental truth of the world. Intelligence agencies use the same kind of language that law enforcement agencies do. They say, we're here to keep you safe. To all the senators, all the congressmen, all the media, they can go out on 60 Minutes anytime they want, and they can command the broadcast attention of the world. But surveillance is not about public safety, and this was very well established in the documents in 2013 for anyone who wants to look at them. Mass surveillance, particularly, which is what's being used against people like protesters and used to identify people like community organizers. Surveillance is about power. It's about control. If you look at the documents, if you look at how these things are used, if you look at how they're targeted, it's about economic espionage, it's about diplomatic control, it's about social influence, and it's about enforcing systemic stability. But stability means the end of progress, right? As Naomi mentioned before, there will always be crises, there will always be disasters that occur, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's an earthquake, whether it's a hurricane, whether it's a human disaster, whether it's a war, whether it's a politically intended act of subversion that upsets our world, there will be a level of instability that's thrust upon us. And then we have to ask ourselves, well, who is benefiting from this, and how are things being restabilized in the wake of this? When 9/11 happened, of course, we had a lot of restrictions on what the intelligence community could and could not do. There were strict limits on the collection and interception of communications that were in the United States, even not about Americans, even not between Americans, but that were simply collected here. But why was that? That was because the intelligence community so grossly abused their powers in the previous civil rights movement. And so restrictions were imposed on them, but then they go, oh, hey, terrorism, everything's different, everything's changed if you don't give us carte blanche, if you don't let us do whatever we want. You're going to die, your children's going to die, the oceans are going to boil off, the atmosphere is going to catch fire. And that works, because when people are fearful, they're very easy to persuade. We see it happening now with the pandemic situation. We see it happening now with media representations of the protest situation, where not just some channels, but actually many of them play up property crimes. They play up the scariness, the sporadic violence that happens in any protest, no matter how well behaved, because there's always going to be some level of knucklehead in any group of human population. And just, I know I've sort of gone off on like way out in the woods here, but I want to bring it back. Association, the right to associate freely, the right to speak freely. All of these things are basic fundamental rights that are supposed to be guaranteed to everyone, and for good reason. All of them are supposed to spring from sort of a mother right, which is privacy, right? Because if you think about it, freedom of speech doesn't mean anything if you can't figure out for yourself something new to say. If you're afraid of being, hounded out for whatever it is, just when you think about it, you're on the wrong side of the issue. Freedom of religion doesn't mean anything if you can't decide for yourself what it is that you truly believe, rather than the beliefs that you inherited from the other. Everything, when you go into the language of private property, having something for yourself, rather than society owning you and everything with you, all of your thoughts, all of your works, to the jury right, which is recognizing that you have an interest to yourself, to your freedom, to your person, that must be overcome by society in order to act against you. All of these things recognize that there are lines around a person that must be respected to produce liberty, which is this general principle that we should be able to do what we want. We should be able to believe what we want. We should be able to advocate for what we want, so long as we're not hurting anyone.